There are moments in history that only a handful of people witness. Moments so extraordinary, so dangerous that those who saw them are bound by an unspoken oath of silence. The night of October 17th, 1964, in a dimly lit warehouse in Hong Kong's Kowloon district was one of those moments. Only 8 people stood in that cold concrete space, and what they witnessed that night would haunt them for the rest of their lives. I was one of them. My name is Ipman, and I am about to reveal the most dangerous fight Bruce Lee ever fought, a fight the world was never meant to know about. These words were written in my private journal locked away for decades. Bruce's children, Shannon and Brandon, found these pages years after both Bruce and I had passed into memory. What they discovered was not just a story about their father. It was a revelation about the man behind the legend, the warrior who faced death itself and emerged transformed. Let me take you back to that autumn evening in 1964. Bruce had returned to Hong Kong after his time in America. He was no longer the boy I had trained in the Wing Chun school. He had evolved, transformed, become something more and something dangerous. His philosophy was changing. He was breaking away from tradition, creating his own path, and this angered many in the martial arts community. They saw him as a traitor, a rebel who disrespected the ancient ways. But there was one man who saw Bruce as something else entirely, a threat that needed to be eliminated. His name was Chun Wei Long, though most knew him simply as the Iron Shadow. Chun was a legend in the underground fighting circuits of Hong Kong and Macau. He had killed 3 men in sanctioned matches legally because they had signed death waivers. 7 others had been permanently crippled by his hands. He practiced a brutal form of hungar, combined with techniques he claimed to have learned from a Tibetan monastery. Though no one could verify this, what everyone could verify was his record: 47 fights, 47 victories, and a reputation that made even the bravest fighters refuse to face him. Chun was not a young man. He was 42 years old that year, but age had not diminished him. If anything, it had sharpened him into something more terrifying. His body was covered in scars, each one a story of survival. His eyes were empty, devoid of mercy or hesitation. When Chun looked at you, you understood that he had made peace with death long ago. The challenge came on October 10th, exactly 1 week before the fight. A letter was delivered to Bruce's apartment in Kowloon Tong. I was there when he opened it. The message was written in traditional Chinese characters, each stroke perfect and deliberate. Bruce Lee, you dishonor the masters. You disrespect tradition. You poison the young with your arrogance. On October 17th at midnight, come to Warehouse 7 in the Kowloon Bay Industrial District. Come alone. Bring witnesses if you wish. They will carry news of your defeat or your death. If you do not come, everyone will know you are a coward. Signed Chun Wei-ong. Bruce read the letter 3 times. His face showed no emotion, but I knew him well enough to see the subtle tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. He looked up at me and said, "Sifu, this is not a challenge. This is an execution invitation. Then do not go." I told him, Chenny Long is not seeking honor. He is seeking blood. There is no shame in refusing a death match with a killer. Bruce was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that still echoes in my mind. "Sephu, I have spent my entire life preparing for moments I hoped would never come. If I run from this, everything I teach becomes a lie. I am not going there to die. I'm going there to prove that fear is just another opponent, and like all opponents, it can be defeated." I tried to persuade him for 3 days. So did his wife, Linda. So did his closest friends. But Bruce had made his decision. The only concession he made was this. He would allow 8 witnesses to attend. 4 would be chosen by Chun, 4 by Bruce. I would be one of Bruce's witnesses. The others were James Lee, Bruce's close friend and training partner, Tucky Camera, one of Bruce's first students in Seattle, and a young journalist named Wong Karmying, who had been documenting Bruce's evolution. Chen's 4 witnesses were unknown to us, silent, stone-faced men who arrived at the warehouse before we did and positioned themselves in the shadows like statues. The warehouse itself was a tomb of concrete and rust. It had been abandoned for years, once used for storing ship equipment. Now it was empty except for a cleared space in the center, roughly 30 feet in diameter. A single overhead light hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting moving shadows across the floor. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of decay. We arrived at 11:45 p.m. Bruce wore simple black clothing, loose pants, and a sleeveless shirt, no shoes. His hands were wrapped lightly, but not heavily taped. He wanted to feel everything. Chun Wei Long was already there. The first thing you noticed about Chun Long was not his size. Though he was massive, perhaps 6 feet tall, and close to 220 pounds of solid muscle. It was not the scars that covered his arms and chest like a map of violence. It was his stillness. Chin stood in the center of that concrete space, like a statue carved from granite. He did not shift his weight. He did not stretch or warm up. He simply existed. His breathing was so controlled, so minimal that from a distance you might think he was not breathing at all. His eyes, dark, emotionless, empty, were fixed on the entrance, waiting for Bruce. When Bruce stepped into the light, Chin's expression did not change. Not a flicker of recognition, not a hint of respect or contempt, nothing. It was as if Bruce was already dead in his mind, and what stood before him was merely a formality to be processed. "You came," Chin said. His voice was deep, growly, like stones grinding together. "I did not think you would. Most men value their lives more than their pride." Bruce walked slowly toward the center of the cleared space. His movement was fluid, relaxed, but I could see the tension coiled beneath the surface. Not fear, but readiness. "I came because you called me a coward," Bruce said quietly. "I came because you think tradition gives you the right to judge others, and I came because someone needs to show you that the old ways are not the only ways." Chin's lips curled into something that might have been a smile, though it held no warmth. "The old ways have survived for centuries. You are 23 years old. You are a child playing with fire. Tonight, you will learn why tradition endures, because it kills those who challenge it." One of Chin's witnesses stepped forward, an elderly man with a long white beard wearing traditional robes. He spoke in a formal ceremonial tone. "This match will continue until one fighter surrenders, is rendered unconscious, or dies. There will be no rules, no referee, no mercy. Both fighters have agreed to these terms. Witnesses will not interfere under any circumstances. Do both fighters accept these conditions?" "I accept," Chin said. Bruce paused for just a moment. "Then I accept." The old man stepped back into the shadows. The warehouse fell into absolute silence. Even the distant sounds of the city, the cars, the boats in the harbor, the voices seemed to fade away, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I have witnessed hundreds of fights in my lifetime. I've seen masters demonstrate techniques that seemed impossible. I've seen speed, power, precision that defied explanation. But I had never seen two fighters face each other with such complete, terrifying focus as I saw that night. Chin moved first. There was no warning, no shift in his stance, no telegraphing of intention. One moment he was still, the next moment he was in motion, and the speed was shocking. For a man of his size and build, Chin moved like a panther. His lead hand shot forward in a straight punch, aimed directly at Bruce's throat, following immediately with a devastating low kick toward Bruce's knee. Bruce moved, not backward, not to the side, forward into the attack. He slipped the punch by millimeters, so close that I saw Chin's fist brush past Bruce's ear. Simultaneously, Bruce jammed Chin's kick with his own shin, neutralizing the power, and fired a lightning-fast finger strike toward Chin's eyes. Chin pulled his head back, just in time. Bruce's fingers passed within an inch of his face, but Bruce didn't stop. He flowed immediately into a low sweep, trying to take Chin's legs out from under him. Chin jumped over the sweep and came down with his heel aimed at Bruce's head, a killing blow if it landed. Bruce rolled sideways, came up on his feet, and the two fighters separated, circling each other. The entire exchange had lasted less than 3 seconds. Wong Coming, the young journalist, was trembling beside me. "Sephew," he whispered, "I have never seen anything like this. They are trying to kill each other." "Yes," I said quietly, "and only one of them will walk out of here." The circling continued for perhaps 20 seconds, an eternity in a fight. Both men were reading each other, calculating, adjusting. Chen's face remained expressionless, but I could see a subtle shift in his posture. He had expected Bruce to retreat, to fight defensively. Instead, Bruce had moved into the attack, had nearly struck his eyes, had forced Chun to evade. This was not what Chun expected. Bruce, on the other hand, showed the faintest trace of a smile, not mockery, not arrogance, recognition. He had tested Chen's speed, his reflexes, his power, and now he knew what he was facing. Chun attacked again, and this time it was different. He came in with a combination that would have destroyed most fighters: a feint high, a thunderous body punch followed by a spinning back fist that generated enormous power. Bruce blocked the body punch, and I saw him grimace in pain. Chen's fist was like iron. The spinning back fist whistled through the air, where Bruce's head had been a split second before, but Bruce's counter was already in motion. As Chun completed his spin, Bruce stepped inside his guard and unleashed a rapid series of chain punches, 5 strikes in less than a second, all aimed at Chen's center line. 3 connected solidly, 1 to the solar plexus, 1 to the sternum, 1 to the throat. Any normal man would have gone down. Chen stumbled backward, coughing, but remained on his feet. His face finally showed emotion, surprise, and something else: respect or fury. "You hit hard for a small man," Chen said, his voice slightly from the throat strike. "But hardness alone does not win fights. Let me show you what real power feels like." What happened next changed everything. Chun Long planted his feet and released a sound from deep within his chest. Not a shout, not a scream, but something primal and terrifying. It was a guttural roar that seemed to vibrate through the concrete floor itself. In Chinese martial arts, we call this the qi, the spirit shout that focuses all of one's internal energy into a single moment. But Chen's was different. It was darker, colder, like the growl of a predator before it strikes. Then he moved. What I witnessed in the next 10 seconds defied everything I thought I knew about human capability. Chun launched himself at Bruce with a ferocity I'd never seen. His attacks came in waves, devastating palm strikes, crushing elbow blows, knee strikes that could shatter ribs. Each technique carried the full weight of his body, the full force of his years of brutal training. The sound of his strikes cutting through the air was like thunder. Bruce defended desperately. He blocked, evaded, deflected, but Chen's assault was relentless. I saw Bruce take a glancing blow to the ribs that made him gasp. Another strike grazed his temple, and for a split second, I saw Bruce's legs wobble. Chun was doing what he did best, overwhelming his opponent with pure sustained violence. Takamura grabbed my arm. "Sephu, we have to stop this." "Bruce's." "No," I said, though my heart was pounding. "If we interfere, Chen's witnesses will claim Bruce surrendered. This must continue." But inside I was terrified. I had trained Bruce since he was a boy. I knew his capabilities, his limits, and I could see that Chun Long was pushing him to the edge of those limits, and perhaps beyond. Bruce retreated across the concrete floor, his breathing heavy now, sweat streaming down his face. Chun pursued him like a machine, methodical, unstoppable. The other witnesses stood frozen, their faces pale in the dim light. Even Chen's own witnesses seemed disturbed by the level of violence they were witnessing. Then Bruce's back hit the wall. He had nowhere left to go. Chen smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen on his face. "It ends now," he said, and launched what was clearly meant to be a finishing blow. A palm strike aimed directly at Bruce's chest at the heart with enough force to stop it permanently. But in that fraction of a second, something changed in Bruce's eyes. I'd seen this look only once before, years ago, during a training session when Bruce had pushed himself to the point of complete exhaustion and then suddenly found a reserve of energy we didn't know existed. His master, Wang Shanliang, had called it the moment of no mind, when thought disappears and pure instinct takes over. Bruce didn't block Chen's palm strike. He didn't evade it. He absorbed it. His hand moved with impossible speed and caught Chen's wrist just as the palm was about to make contact with his chest. The sound of their impact echoed through the warehouse, flesh meeting flesh, force meeting force. For a frozen moment, the two men stood locked together, Chen's full power pressing forward, Bruce's entire body resisting, channeling, redirecting, and then Bruce moved. What happened next I can only describe as an explosion of technique. Bruce twisted Chen's captured wrist using a Wing Chun Lop SA, pulling Chen off balance. Simultaneously, he drove his knee into Chen's thigh, not the groin, but the precise point where the femoral nerve runs close to the surface. Chen's leg buckled slightly, just for an instant. That instant was all Bruce needed. He released Chen's wrist and struck, not with power, not with rage, but with surgical precision. A finger jab to the floating ribs, disrupting Chen's breathing. A palm strike to the collarbone that I heard crack even from where I stood. An elbow to the jaw that snapped Chen's head sideways. And finally a side kick to Chen's knee. Not to break it, but to hyperextend it just enough to destroy his base. Chun Wei Long crashed to the concrete floor. The warehouse fell into absolute silence. The overhead light continued to sway, casting moving shadows across the scene. Bruce stood over Chun, his chest heaving, blood trickling from a cut above his eye, his body trembling with exhaustion. Chun tried to rise. His arms shook with the effort. His face for the first time showed pain, showed vulnerability. He made it to one knee, then tried to stand. His injured leg gave out, and he fell again. "Stay down," Bruce said quietly. His voice was hoarse-strained. "This is over." Chen looked up at him, and in that moment I saw something extraordinary. The emptiness in Chen's eyes was gone. In its place was something almost human, recognition, perhaps even understanding. "Why?" Chen asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you finish me? You had the chance. You could have struck my throat, my temple. You could have killed me." Bruce extended his hand. Chen stared at it for a long moment as if he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Then slowly he reached up and took it. Bruce pulled him to his feet, or rather to one foot, as Chen had to keep weight off his injured knee. "Because," Bruce said, "I didn't come here to kill you. I came here to prove a point. The old ways and the new ways, they don't have to be enemies. Tradition has value, but so does evolution. You are a master, Chun Wei Long, a true martial artist. But you've spent so long defending the past that you've forgotten the past was once the future. Someone somewhere created those ancient techniques you protect. They innovated. They evolved. I'm doing the same thing." Chen was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, once a small gesture of acknowledgement. One of Chen's witnesses, the elderly man who had announced the rules, stepped forward from the shadows. His face showed something I hadn't expected, tears. "In 40 years of witnessing matches," he said, his voice trembling, "I have never seen this. Mercy at the moment of victory. Honor when death was available. Bruce Lee, you have shown us something more valuable than fighting skill. You have shown us wisdom." The atmosphere in that warehouse shifted in a way I cannot fully describe. It was as if the air itself had changed. The tension, the violence, the anticipation of death, all of it dissolved, replaced by something sacred, something profound. James Lee stepped forward and handed Bruce a towel. Bruce wiped the blood from his face, wincing as he touched the cut above his eye. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the massive adrenaline dump that follows such intense combat. I had seen this before in Fighters After Life or Death Encounters. The body, having prepared itself for the ultimate test, now had to process the reality that survival had been achieved. Chun Long remained standing on one leg, supported by two of his witnesses. His face, which had been a mask of stone for the entire evening, now showed something complex, a mixture of pain, contemplation, and what I can only describe as liberation. He looked at Bruce for a long moment, then spoke again. "I have fought for 23 years, Chen said slowly, each word carefully chosen. "I have broken men. I have killed men. I have built my reputation on fear and dominance. Tonight you defeated me not just with your fists, but with something I had forgotten existed, the true spirit of martial arts. You could have humiliated me. You could have ended my life. Instead, you offered me your hand." He paused, struggling with emotions that perhaps he hadn't felt in decades. "I came here tonight to destroy you because I feared what you represented, change, evolution, the end of everything I had built my identity upon. But now I see that I was not protecting tradition. I was hiding behind it, using it as an excuse to remain stagnant, to avoid growth." Wong Karming, the young journalist, had been scribbling frantically in his notebook throughout the fight. Now he stood frozen, his pen hovering above the page, tears streaming down his face. "This is not just a fight story," he whispered to me. "This is something else entirely." Bruce walked slowly across the concrete floor to where I stood. Each step showed the cost of the battle: bruised ribs, strained muscles, the lingering effects of Chen's devastating attacks. When he reached me, he bowed deeply, the traditional gesture of respect from student to teacher. "Sephew," he said quietly, "thank you for being here. Thank you for believing I could survive this." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Bruce, what you did tonight, stopping when you could have finished him, showing mercy when violence was expected, this is the highest level of martial arts. Any fool can destroy an opponent, but it takes a true master to transform an enemy into something else." "I didn't plan it," Bruce admitted. "When his attack came and my back was against the wall, I felt something I'd never felt before, not fear of dying, but clarity about living. I realized that if I killed Chun or humiliated him, I would become exactly what he accused me of being, someone who disrespects the martial arts. But if I could defeat him and still honor his skill, his experience, his journey, maybe I could prove that my way and the traditional way don't have to be at war." Taki Kimura joined us, his face still pale from the intensity of what we had witnessed. "Bruce, when Chen had you against that wall, I thought we were about to watch you die." Bruce smiled, though I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. So did I for about half a second. But then something my Sephew taught me years ago came back. In the moment of greatest danger, there is also the moment of greatest opportunity. When Chen committed fully to that final strike, he left himself completely open. It was all or nothing for both of us. One of Chen's witnesses, a middle-aged man with scars across his knuckles, approached our group cautiously. He bowed to Bruce with deep respect. "Mr. Lee, Master Chen wishes to speak with you before we leave. He has something important to say." We walked together to where Chen sat on an overturned crate, his injured knee being wrapped by another witness. As we approached, Chen attempted to stand, but Bruce quickly gestured for him to remain seated. "Please, Master Chen, you don't need to stand for me." Chen looked up at Bruce, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never expected to see: gratitude. "Bruce Lee, I need to tell you something I have told no one for many years." He paused, gathering his thoughts, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of long-buried pain. "When I was young, younger than you are now, I was like you. I questioned everything. I wanted to evolve, to experiment, to combine techniques from different styles. I challenged the traditional masters, not out of disrespect, but out of genuine desire to learn and grow." His eyes grew distant, remembering. "They crushed me, not just physically, though there were beatings, but spiritually. They told me I was arrogant, disrespectful, unworthy. They expelled me from their schools. They spread rumors that destroyed my reputation. I was shunned by the martial arts community." Bruce listened intently, and I could see understanding dawning in his expression. "So I became what they accused me of being," Chen continued. "I stopped questioning. I stopped evolving. I embraced the most brutal, traditional, unforgiving version of martial arts I could find. I became the enforcer, the punisher, the man who protected tradition by destroying anyone who challenged it. I became everything I once hated because it was the only way they would accept me back into the community." A single tear rolled down Chen's weathered face. "Tonight when you defeated me and then extended your hand, you gave me back something I lost 30 years ago. You reminded me who I used to be, who I could have been." The warehouse had grown completely silent. Even the distant sounds of the city seemed to have faded away. In that moment, under that single swaying light bulb, something profound was happening. Not just the aftermath of a fight, but the transformation of two souls. Bruce knelt down, so he was at eye level with Chun. "Master Chun, it's not too late. You're 42 years old. You have years of experience, skill, and knowledge. What if instead of seeing my evolution as a threat to tradition, you saw it as an addition to tradition? What if we could learn from each other?" Chin stared at Bruce in disbelief. "You would train with me after what I tried to do to you tonight. You tried to kill me because you believed you were protecting something sacred," Bruce said. That takes courage. Misguided courage perhaps, but courage nonetheless. Now imagine what you could do if you channeled that same intensity, that same dedication toward growth instead of preservation. The elderly witness, who had announced the rules, stepped forward again. His voice, when he spoke, trembled with emotion. I have served as a witness and arbiter for underground matches for 40 years. I have seen men die in this very warehouse. I have watched fighters crippled, careers destroyed, lives shattered. But tonight I have witnessed something that transcends combat. This is what the ancient masters truly meant when they spoke of martial arts as a path to enlightenment. He turned to address all 8 witnesses present. What we have seen here tonight must be remembered, but it must also be protected. The world outside these walls would not understand. They would sensationalize it, commercialize it, turn it into entertainment. They would miss the profound truth of what occurred here. James Lee nodded in agreement. We should take an oath, all 8 of us. We speak of this to no one outside this room, not to the press, not to other martial artists, not even to our families. What happened here remains between us until the time is right for the story to be told. One by one, each witness agreed. We formed a circle in that dim warehouse, for men who had come with Bruce, for who had come with Chun, and we spoke an oath that we would guard the secret until death or until circumstances demanded otherwise. Wong Kar-ming reluctantly closed his notebook. This would have been the greatest story of my career, he said with a sad smile. But I understand some truths are too important to be reduced to newspaper headlines. Chun Long, still seated with his injured knee elevated, looked around at all of us. I have one request, he said. Bruce Lee, if you are willing, I would like to train with you, not as student to teacher, not as teacher to student, but as equals exploring the martial path together. I have much to learn about evolution. Perhaps I have something to teach about the foundations that evolution must build upon. Bruce's face lit up with genuine joy. Master Chun, nothing would honor me more. But first, we need to get you to a doctor. That knee needs proper treatment. It will heal, Chun said dismissively. Knees always do. But opportunities like this to train with someone who defeated you and then showed you mercy, those don't come twice in a lifetime. Over the next hour, we helped Chun to a private clinic where a discreet doctor, one familiar with treating injuries from underground fights, examined his knee. Fortunately, no ligaments were torn, though there was significant swelling and strain. The doctor prescribed rest, ice, and no training for at least 3 weeks. As we prepared to leave the clinic, Chun grabbed Bruce's arm. 3 weeks, he said. In 3 weeks, I will come to your school. We will begin. I'll be waiting, Bruce replied. We left the clinic at nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. The streets of Hong Kong were quiet, the neon signs still glowing, but the crowds long gone. James, Taki, Wong, and I walked with Bruce through the empty streets, none of us speaking, each processing what we had witnessed in our own way. Finally, James broke the silence. Bruce, can I ask you something? When Chun had you against that wall, when his final attack was coming, what were you thinking? Bruce was quiet for several steps before answering. I wasn't thinking at all. That's the point. For years, Sephu has been teaching me about no mind, the state where technique becomes instinct, where thought disappears and pure action remains. Tonight, for the first time in my life, I truly experienced it. When Chen's attack came, there was no fear, no plan, no strategy. There was only response, perfect, complete response. He paused, looking up at the night sky. And in that moment of perfect response, I saw something else too. I saw that Chen wasn't my enemy. He was my mirror. He represented every doubt I've ever had about my own path, every fear that I'm wrong to challenge tradition, every worry that I'm being arrogant or disrespectful. By defeating him, I wasn't defeating an opponent. I was defeating my own insecurities. Taki Kimura shook his head in wonder. Most people fight their entire lives without learning what you learned tonight. Most people never face an opponent like Chun Long, Bruce replied with a slight smile. Sometimes we need to be pushed to the absolute edge to discover what lies beyond the edge. We reached Bruce's apartment building as the first hints of dawn were beginning to light in the eastern sky. Linda, Bruce's wife, had stayed awake all night, sick with worry. When she saw Bruce walk through the door alive, relatively intact despite the bruises and the cut above his eye, she collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "I thought you weren't coming back," she whispered. "I thought I would never see you again." Bruce held her tightly. "I promised you I would come home. I always keep my promises." That morning, as the sun rose over Hong Kong, I sat in my own apartment and wrote in my private journal, the journal that Bruce's children would discover decades later. I wrote about the fight, about the transformation I had witnessed, about the mercy that had turned an enemy into a potential ally. But I also wrote about something deeper. I wrote about how the true purpose of martial arts is not to defeat others, but to transcend the self. How the highest level of combat is the combat that never needs to happen because understanding has replaced conflict. How Bruce in that warehouse had demonstrated something far more advanced than any technique or strategy. He had demonstrated wisdom. I ended my journal entry with these words. Tonight I watched my student face death and choose life, not just for himself, but for his opponent. I have trained hundreds of students over my lifetime. I have produced skilled fighters, disciplined practitioners, knowledgeable teachers. But Bruce Lee is something different. He is not just a martial artist. He is a philosopher who uses the body as his medium, a teacher who instructs through action rather than words, a warrior who understands that the greatest victory is the one that transforms rather than destroys. If the martial arts have a future, it will be because of people like him, people who honor the past while fearlessly creating the future. True to his word, Qianlong appeared at Bruce's school exactly 3 weeks later. His knee had healed, though he walked with a slight limp that would remain with him for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of that night. The relationship between Bruce and Chun became one of the most productive partnerships in martial arts history, though almost no one knew about it. They trained together in private, sharing techniques, philosophies, and insights. Chun taught Bruce about the deeper internal aspects of traditional Chinese martial arts, the breathing methods, the energy cultivation, the mental discipline that had sustained warriors for centuries. Bruce taught Chun about biomechanics, efficiency of movement, cross-training concepts, and the willingness to discard what doesn't work, regardless of how traditional it might be. Their training sessions became legendary among the small circle of people who knew about them. The contrast was fascinating. Chun, the traditional master, learning to question and experiment. Bruce, the innovator, learning to appreciate and integrate ancient wisdom. Years later, when Bruce moved to America and began developing Jeet Kune, his personal expression of martial arts, the influence of those sessions with Chun was evident. Bruce's famous quote, "Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own," was born from those conversations, that partnership, that unlikely friendship forged in violence and cemented in mutual respect. Qianlong never spoke publicly about the fight. He never sought credit for his influence on Bruce's development. He simply continued teaching, but with a different approach, more open, more curious, more willing to see value in new ideas. His students noticed a change, though they never understood its source. When Bruce Lee died tragically young in 1973, Qianlong was one of only 8 people invited to a private ceremony before the public funeral. He stood silently, tears streaming down his weathered face, remembering the night a young warrior had defeated him and then given him back his soul. The 8 witnesses kept their oath. We never spoke of that night to outsiders. We never wrote about it for publication. We never sought recognition or credit, but we remembered. And now, through these journal pages discovered by Bruce's children, the story can finally be told, not as a tale of violence, but as a story of transformation, not as a record of one man's victory over another, but as a testament to the highest ideals of martial arts, respect, growth, mercy, and the endless pursuit of truth. On October 17, 1964, in a forgotten warehouse in Kowloon, 8 people witnessed Bruce Lee's most dangerous fight. But what they truly witnessed was something far more rare and precious. The moment when combat transcends violence and becomes art, when defeating an enemy creates a friend, when the warrior's path leads not to destruction, but to enlightenment. That is the story we have kept secret for all these years. That is the truth we now entrust to you. May it inspire you as it has inspired us not to fight, but to understand, not to defeat, but to transform, not to destroy, but to create. This is the legacy of Bruce Lee. This is the lesson learned in darkness and sealed in silence. This is the fight that only 8 people witnessed and that the world needed to hear.